Welcome, everyone. We're very happy to see all of you here. All right, and we are going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to first introduce my colleagues. To my right, or this way, is Kate Sachs, and she is our writing specialist who was recently hired to work with all of our fully online psychology students, as well as our students at the West Los Angeles campus. And Kate is also a professional writer and has published some of her work, really, really great work as well. So Kate, if you just want to say hi.
Oh, thanks, Gina. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here. We're excited to talk to you guys today.
And Carlos, this is Carlos Jimenez, and he has been with Writing Support for at least 10 years, I think, right, Carlos? And has just been an incredible support. And so we are all very pleased to be able to provide you with this webinar. And Carlos, did you just want to say
Yes, just
hi?
want to say hello and glad to see some familiar faces from our last webinar. It's just great to be here today to talk about APA.
And we will be doing some interactive work, so we do encourage you to get in and do some of that APA formatting on a practice page that we have for you. And my name is Regina Meister, and I'm the Associate Director of Writing Support. So we're going to start out with a poll. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that. And the question is, do you own an APA manual? Specifically, I am a proud owner of the APA 7th edition manual. So let's see who says yes, who says no. Okay, it looks like we have 57% who said no, and then we have 43% who said yes. Thank you. For those of you who do not own it, there's a wonderful website that we will be talking about. Oh, we have 50 and 50 now. Okay, so about half of you. There are, and let me just share results here. Can you all see that? Okay, great. So thank you. That gives us kind of a sense of what your resources are. And we will be sharing a website, the APA website, and I'm going to put in a link here in the chat in a little bit that is the website where you can go and look for details on APA format from their website. So with that, Carlos, I am going to give it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Gina. And yes, so about a 50-50, with ownership of the manual. That's good to know. All of the information that we are providing today is generally coming from that APA manual, 7th edition. Extremely a valuable resource to have, to own, but in addition, we do have quite a few free resources available for you that we'll talk about, in a little bit. But yeah, I'll go ahead and share my screen and we'll pull up a PowerPoint presentation that I have today that we all will share here. And we'll just, generally talk about some basics regarding reference formatting, specific aspects of the reference entry. Every paper that you have to write as a GSCP student, typically, is going to be in this APA format, this APA style. So we will, let's see, I'm going to admit a few here that just joined. So we'll be focusing on specifically student papers and formatting the reference format, and also integrating citations into the body of the paper. So like I mentioned before, this is all basically coming from the APA manual. If you're not, directly familiar with the purpose of the APA manual, it's generally intended to help authors write and publish in the scholarly fields of the social sciences. So in particular, there is a focus on student papers, and that's where we'll be focusing on, that's where we'll focus on today, specifically for student papers. But in general, it's for all authors to help them to get published and to follow, a systematic formatting convention known as, APA style, in a way that helps to credit, the research that's documented, and also to integrate those ideas right into scholarly work. So you might see some references to specific page numbers. If you do have, I want to just mention, if you have any questions, feel free to drop a question in the chat. There is a chance that, we might answer your question in some subsequent slides. But we will try our best to dedicate some time for some Q&A as well at the end. But I believe Gina was going to help monitor that chat. So if you do have some questions, she might be able to answer those in the chat. Otherwise, also feel free to raise your hand. But, like I said, we might want to wait until after some of the material has been presented, then feel free to ask some questions. But, as a student at the School of Education and Psychology, as I mentioned, all of your instructors, they typically are going to want your paper to be in this APA format. So this is an example of a title page that you will, if the rubric or if the assignment instructions, relay, APA style, APA format, you're always going to want to create a title page for your assignments, for your writing assignments. So you can see the information here, and notice the title there of the document at the top there in bold. And then we have a couple spaces. Mostly everything is double spaced, right? There's a little bit of space there between the title and the author, but very simple information there on the title page: the student's name, the institution, maybe the class and instructor info and the date there. But that information should be on that title page. Also notice the page number. So your page numbers begin on the title page there at the top right there. And there is no running header. There used to be a requirement there for where you would have like a running header or a shortened version of your title at the top. And that's not required for a student paper. So we'll break down a little bit. We'll start with the references. So if you are integrating ideas, whether it's your textbook or you have journal articles or any sources where you have concepts that are not common knowledge, not of your own, you're going to need to reference them. So you're going to need to give credit for that, right? And the way that we do that is through this process of creating a reference entry and text citations, right? So we'll start with the reference entry, which all of your papers, if they have these ideas from outside sources, each of those citations should have a reference entry. And the references are at the end of the paper after the conclusion section there. And so we want to think about these pieces. The APA manual calls them elements. And so, and they're usually always in this order. So we want to think about who would represent the person, or maybe it's multiple people, multiple authors, right, who authored the work. It could be an organization as well. But that is usually the first position, the first element in the reference. Then we have when would be the year that the journal article or the textbook or the book was published. It could be the year, the date that the web page was posted. So different formats. It could involve a month and a day for more specific periodicals, but that year comes next. Then the what represents the title. What's the title of the work? And then where can we find it? Last piece would be either the publisher name, or we have many things that we find online. So that would come in a URL, or this DOI, which we'll talk about in a little bit, which stands for the digital object identifier. All right, so those are the basic elements, and no matter what type of source, whether it's a book or it's a journal article or a web page, we always want to think about these elements and try to include them when we have that information as much as possible in the reference entry. All right, so this is a typical reference page that you'll want to include at the end of the paper, and it should represent the sources that you've cited in the body of the text. So if the reference appears here in the reference list, then there should be a text citation that corresponds, with the reference, and vice versa. If it's in the body of the paper, then there should be a reference entry for it. And just might want to open up to ask you, as you see this reference page, and gauging your familiarity about, a lot of you mentioned you already have the manual. So what are some, just by sight, visualizing that, as you see this, what are some formatting characteristics? And maybe you can just type in the chat. What are some formatting characteristics that you see? So like, for example, double spacing, right? Everything is double spaced on the page. Is there anything else that anyone might jot down in the chat that you notice, just a formatting characteristic that you see? Second line has a tab. Great. Yeah, the indentation of the second line. So that is called the hanging indent, right? And it helps the reader as we scan through the references, right? We can see that first line of each reference hangs out there, and that's usually going to have the first author or the name of the organization, and that'll be there. That's called the hanging indent. So it's a special indentation that we can set with like Microsoft Word, so that the second and subsequent lines of the reference are indented. All right, yeah, great other idea there, Clement. Italics. So some things are italicized, right? And so we'll look at some specific examples of, what gets italicized and what doesn't, but yes, use of italics. So we have indentation, spacing, use of italics. Anything else that anyone sees? So I also noticed the alphabetization. So we have Borges, and then Fishman, and then Rawls. So you'll notice that we're ordering our sources in a specific way. We want to alphabetize them by that author's name. And then also I would say punctuation. So we'll look at elements of punctuation. Notice every element that I was mentioning, the who, when, what, where, is separated by periods, right? So punctuation, italics. Also, we'll talk about capitalization. That's another format. You'll notice some things are capitalized in certain ways. So capitalization, italics, use of punctuation, and indentation. Those are really the core formatting pieces that we'll talk more about as we look at some specific examples there of individual source types. Okay, so just some general hints before we start to look at specifics. Think about italics. You can I like to try to think about some purpose behind why, why we might italicize, or why we might, capitalize a certain way. You can think about the larger publication, the major publication, those are going to be italicized. So maybe not a journal article title, but the journal itself, the larger piece, would be italicized. Or like books, complete books, maybe not the chapter title, but the complete book title. Those things are in italics. Or like a standalone document. If it's a document like a report or something that's not part of anything larger, then that takes italics. The reference page always would be double spaced. There is an exception to dissertation. So if you are a doctoral student, you have dozens and dozens of references, so you can single space those individually, but we want to double space between them. And so capitalization, as I mentioned, you'll want to become familiar with two terms, one called sentence case and one called title case. And so we'll look at some specific examples of those types of capitalizing. And as I mentioned, the hanging indent, we want to try to utilize that, for a nice streamlined view of the reference list there. And also those links, we want to try to make them live. The purpose of the reference list is to try to make it as easy as possible for the reader to locate, the information in those sources. So making those links live so that the reader can just click on it and it'll take them to that, article That's what we want to aim for as much as possible. So a few examples that we'll cycle through, and after we do this one, we'll do a little bit of practice. But the first example here you'll see is from a book, so like your standard textbook or you know, a very common reference type, and you'll notice the elements are there. So the elements, if it's an individual author, we're always going to use the last name of the author, and then we're going to use a comma and then their initials. So sometimes authors will have one or two names, so you might have two initials for the author. It's just kind of how you see it on the article or on the source that you have. But you'll notice the initial is there, and then there's a period and a space, and that's the who. So the author's last name followed by the first initial, and then we have the year of the publication, and that represents the when, right? And the year is always in parentheses there, and it's followed by a period. So after the who and when, then we have the title of the book, or the what, right? So you'll notice the title there, italicized, and then the capitalization here is called sentence case. And that just means you're capitalizing like you would a typical sentence, right? Where you have the first word of the sentence is capital. If there's a colon in the title, then you want to capitalize the word following that colon. So it's typically a subtitle. So you might see certain titles with colons, and then they have some more text after. So the word that follows the colon gets the capital. But everything else stays lowercase, unless you have like a proper noun, you know, like a country or a nationality, then that would get capitalized. But everything else doesn't, stays lowercase. If there's addition, so sometimes you might have additions, we put that information in parentheses there, and notice the lowercase ed period is the abbreviation for addition. And that goes in parentheses following the title. So that would be the what, and then we end it with the period. And the last element is the where, which is the publisher. So the publisher is Harvard University Press. So we want to end that with a period. So those are the elements there for a book reference, and which will come up probably pretty common, you know, for you in your work as a student. As at bare minimum, you'll have your textbook there that most of the time you'll have to reference and cite there. Within an article, so when we have magazines where we might have periodicals and they're updated daily, there you'll notice the date information is more specific, right? So instead of just the year, we also have a month and a day. So if you're on, you know, an online news site, or something that is updated with daily issues, and you can visibly see, you know, a month and a day, then include that information in the reference entry there. But the author, you see the author's positioning, and the punctuation there stays the same as the who. And then in parentheses, we have the year and the month and the day there. Notice the full month name and the number of the day. And then Asia's diaspora. So that would be the article title. So the article title is not italicized, and it's in sentence case, but the larger piece where we can find that article in the New Yorker, that takes the italics, and that gets title case. And we also want to include the page range. So because we know that maybe there could be many issues, many different articles in a particular issue, right? So we want to identify where the pages, you know, the pages of that particular article. And then the link, the URL, it could be the home page, the newyorker.com, that will do fine for the reference entry. And then in the body of the paper, we're just using the author's last name followed by year. And we'll go into more detail about citations, but this is just an example of how you might cite this article in the body of your paper there. All right, so I wanted to just shift a little here to some practice. So I'm going to stop my share. And I think, Gina, thank you for putting that in.
You're very welcome. So we have, I see that we have a number of people here already on the practice
Google
page,
Doc.
the exercise page.
Okay, and so you'll notice here, and I'll try to line this up. Hopefully you can, there we go. Can you see that okay, everyone? Yeah. So we have some examples. So this is a worksheet and we'll start with number one. Basically, you see the information for a book, right? And so we see the example of the reference entry there. And what we want to do is create a reference for this number one, as if we were creating in a reference list, right? So did we want to ask for a volunteer, Gina?
Yeah, do we have a volunteer who would like to try out number one? And great, Clément, I saw your hand go up, so that would be terrific.
Sure. And if you can type directly into that Google Doc
Can I? Okay.
right under if you go under number one there.
So the author first. Probably
Yes,
quicker,
correct.
probably quicker if I tell you what I would write. I would put the authors, sorry. So Zaruslova,
Mhm,
L, a comma, L dot,
mhm.
comma, Chaikin, comma, O dot. Kozolievsky, is that the first name? Is that
Okay.
your name?
Yeah,
And
I'll
I
get us
don't
started
know.
here. I'm just gonna copy the
Yeah.
last name there.
And for some reason, I'm not able to write on this, Carlos.
Oh, are
I
you
was going
not?
to try and, so maybe you can dictate, Clément, as
Oh no, I think
Carlos is putting
I
his.
didn't press the annotate button at the bottom. That's why. There's a little
Ah,
annotate at the bottom. Yeah, okay.
there's an
Uh,
annotate. All
yeah,
right, thank
I just
you.
realized. Yeah. Mhm.
At the bottom of the
The little group,
document?
the bottom left.
Okay.
Okay, are you able to see that line
Uh,
now? You can click on there if you want to keep going. There you go. I see.
Okay, so then there's a lot of
So I got
Russian.
the first last name. Yeah, Russian. If you, I like it. I usually copy that. You can copy that last name
Oh,
and
okay.
paste it,
I think I've lost my little annotate. Where is it
or
gone?
just type it. Or I can start us. So
Yeah.
it'd be Zuralova, L, right? And there are how many authors? Just two,
To
right? So we want to put that ampersand symbol.
Okay, and what would go next, Steph? Yeah, there we go.
Can I just ask something that I've been asking myself all the time? When
Sure.
you're putting within your paper the same thing, do you put and instead of the little sign?
Good
I
question.
don't
Very
remember.
good question.
That's a good question. Yeah, in the reference entry, it's always going to be the ampersand symbol.
Okay.
But if we're citing in a text citation,
Yeah.
and I think we have an example of that in some later slides
Okay.
where we'll use the word
I
and
never know
versus
which
the
way it is, but I
Just
remember.
depending, yeah, depending on the way that the citation is integrated in the paper. If it comes at the end of a sentence, it's going to be the ampersand. But if the citation is part of the sentence, then you're going to use the word and. If that makes
Yep.
sense. And we'll talk about that more when we get there. Okay, so Clément, do you want to keep guiding Carlos? So what would come
Yeah,
after?
I was trying to type, but I was going to put the title of the book, which is The Development of Empathy, Phenomenology, Structure, and Human Nature, in italics.
Mhm.
Okay, and then but
Sorry, no,
before that,
I forgot the year. Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
And
2020,
also authors, what else do we need there with that second author?
2021. I forgot the year. Yeah.
but before that, we need the first initial, right?
Yeah.
So it's Alexi. All right, and then what year? 2020.
2020.
Okay.
Yeah. And then dot, and then the title of the book in italics, The Development of Empathy, Phenomenology, Structure, and Human Nature.
Okay.
And italics, and between brackets, not in italics, first edition, if necessary.
Very good.
Let's see the italics there.
There we go.
All right, and then
And then the publisher,
the edition.
first edition, in brackets, first edition, not in italics.
Typically,
Yeah.
You know, if there are multiple editions, maybe we would include the first, but if there
Okay.
isn't a second, then, you know, probably wouldn't be necessary to say this was a first edition, right? But, you know, we don't know. There could be a second edition and you could be referencing an earlier,
Okay.
right? So before we go, what about the title though? Before we move on to that one, is the
I wouldn't
title,
put capitals. I wouldn't put capitals.
right? So we want to make this what we call sentence T,
Lowercase.
right? So only the
good.
T,
Uh,
right? And then remember the word after the colon stays, but then structure,
oh, okay.
human nature.
All right.
All
Is there
right.
a way to increase the font size? I'm having trouble. It's kind of small.
Let's see.
Oh.
Is that
Okay, now
better?
I'm good now. I'm good.
Okay.
Maybe a
Yeah, I'm
little.
trying to get the balance here of the two windows there. Okay, and then is there anything else?
Yeah, the publisher.
The publisher, right? So that would be the Routledge Publishing. Okay. Does everybody agree there? Does that look right? The one thing that we can do here is the indentation, and
no.
they showed me, let's see, is that in format? So if you go into for a Google Doc, this is the Google Doc, so it's not going to be the same for Word, but if you go into the indentation options here, you can see the special indent is where you can find hanging, and we want a 1/2 inch, so we want a 0.5, and then we hit apply, and you see how that automatically brought that second line over to the next. So it makes things really a lot easier when we're adding references if we set the hanging indent, because that automatically that second line, and then when you just hit enter, you'll have a new line for your next reference.
Can I ask
So-
Carlos, to
Mhm.
make sure the indent is on the second line, you put your cursor on the second line? Is that what you did?
I actually went to the first line of the reference, and
Ah.
that's where I
Ah.
did the hanging indent.
Ah, okay.
Carlos, if you could,
Mhm.
I don't know if everyone saw on the screen what you did with the Google Doc. Can you
Okay, let me
demonstrate
make
that
this
again?
bigger. Trying to make this a little bit bigger there. So what I just went to insert here. This is at 100%, so it might be small, but I went to insert there. I mean, I'm sorry, I went
In
into
format,
format, and then
yeah.
I went into align and indent, and then down here is the indentation options. That's where you click, and I did it at the beginning of the first, you know, the very next to the first author's name. Hanging 0.5, and then you hit apply there. So that's in the format tab up here.
Does that make
Okay, so-
sense?
And then one more piece there, we forgot the period, right? So we want to add the period after the final element there in the reference, right? And we would double space it. So we will want to double space that. Any questions on that book reference?
Yes, there would be there needs to be a comma after L period and before the ampersand. Because I don't know if
There,
is that supposed to have a comma there?
Yeah.
I believe so,
Okay, no
yes.
problem.
Yeah,
Okay,
there is a
just
comma there.
asking.
Yep,
Okay.
good question, thank you.
Mhm.
Mhm. All right, so let's go back to the PowerPoint. We can look at some other examples. So probably the most common example, common reference type, right, that you will have for your papers is a journal article reference, right? Because many of your assignments are required to utilize peer-reviewed journal articles as your sources, right? So, and we're getting mostly everything, you know, online. So it'll most likely be an electronic issue of a journal article. And there's this DOI, which the DOI just kind of is like a URL. It stands for the digital object identifier. And it's just a link that'll take us directly to the journal article. So it's the newer versions now look like almost like a general, like a URL to an online source. But let's look at some of the elements here. So the who, when, what, and where, right? There's a little bit more detail here because we have a journal article. So in this case, we have two authors, right? So notice the last name with the comma and then the initial period, comma. Then we have the ampersand before the final author there with the last name, comma, and then the first initial with the period. So those are the two authors. And then we have the year there in parentheses, 2007 with the period. And then we have the first piece, which is the journal article title, right? So the journal article title is the smaller component there. So we're going to use sentence case, right? So we're going to capitalize the L, everything else stays lowercase, and then we have a period. Then we have the leadership quarterly. So that's the journal, that's the larger piece there. And so that is title case and italics. So title case just means we're capitalizing the major words in the title. There's only 3 words here and they're long, so they all, they all get capitalized, but it's the major words or the content words that you're capitalizing when you use title case, right? And then we have some other numbers here. Does anyone know what the 18 and the 5 stand for? Maybe type in the chat. What does the 18 stand for? Any guesses or?
I think it means addition. Is it the
Close for an article, it's called, it has a
Carlos?
different name.
We have, it looks like Sheila who said it, volume.
Volume, yes. So the 18 will be the volume. So journal articles are usually separated and categorized by volumes. And then the 5, any ideas what the 5 represents? So within those volumes, we have issues. So close to addition, but we call it the issue. So the 18 is the volume and the 5 is the issue. And we always know that because of the way that the formatting is, and they're right next to each other like that. So you'll notice the 18 is in italics. So that always represents the volume. You might not always have issues. So if there isn't an issue, then we would just put the comma right after. But the 5 represents the issue number, and that is in parentheses there without italics. So you have the 18 there next to the 5, and that's how you always know because of that formatting, volume, and issue number, right? And then right next to it is the page range. So among that, particular issue, we could have a dozen different articles. So we're identifying where the pages are to that particular article. And then the last piece is that DOI link. So it's just that long string that's just going to help the reader, your readers to locate that source in the World Wide Web. And there's actually a pretty cool tool here because most new sources have the DOI link. It's more present, readily present there on articles. But if for some reason you don't see a DOI, you can search for one using this free service here from crossref.org. So if you click on this link, it's a blank query, and you can literally copy and paste multiple references into this query, and then you hit submit and a DOI will pop up if it exists. So if you're doing a large scale study, or you're having trouble finding those DOIs and those links, then you can use this tool. It's very helpful, and it's free, of no cost there. I can try to, let's see, I'd have to stop my share. I can try to put that link in there, but we will definitely share this PowerPoint with you, after we're done. So all of these links are here for you. Okay. And, if you're going to cite it in the body of the paper, you do always want to include those 2. Oh, thank you, Mary. Thank you for adding that. You want to include those 2 authors' last names in the body of the paper. And if it's in parentheses, you are going to use that ampersand symbol. Yes, Clement, did you have a question?
Sorry to interrupt you, but it's not the first time I've been wondering about UI because I'm at level beginners. But basically, I'm reading an article in the library from a magazine or a review.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying the only way to find a DOI will be to go on that website?
No, not necessarily. Usually the DOI is attached to the journal article information in many different places. It could be in the database, like the landing page.
Oh,
It could
okay.
be actually on the document itself. There's a DOI. So it can be there, in many different places. Most of the more recent sources do include it, but I think if you go further, the further back you go, they might not exist for the source.
Oh,
But
yeah.
this tool will actually search the whole World Wide Web for you, and it will locate those. You can literally just copy your whole reference list and put it into this query, and then they will appear.
Do they put DOIs on hard copies if you get like a journal or a review from the library, which is a hard copy, or do you have to look for it?
That's a good question. I'm not sure 100%, but I know, the method of downloading and printing copies, you're printing PDFs, so they are electronic files. So you print those out and usually the DOI will appear on there. But I'm not sure about an actual physical print copy that you would have if it would have the DOI. But I believe it wouldn't, maybe because it's an electronic link, right? So it's going to take you to the electronic version. But if you download, a lot of those are available to download on the library websites, and you'll download a PDF, which will usually have the, in the header or footer area, you'll see the DOI there for a lot of the journal articles.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Karen, did you have a question? Sorry, you're muted. Might have to unmute you.
Okay, here I am. Suppose in the journal article I used, let's take that first one. I used 420 to 430 and I'd stopped there and then I went on to 447 to 462. How do you handle that?
Was that the same article?
Yes, but I didn't read it. I
Mhm.
didn't read
Yeah, so
middle
that
page.
wouldn't matter. You're just going to give the whole range of the article. So whether you read only half of that and you're using, a portion of to support, that's not relevant. You're just giving, this is the complete article where you can find the first page of the article and the last page. You're putting that in the reference, not necessarily which page you accessed.
Got
Does
it.
that answer? Okay, thank you. Those are good questions. Yeah, good questions. All right, I'm going to keep moving it along here as we come to another example. So like we were talking about the DOI question. If the DOI doesn't exist, then sometimes the journal will have a home page or something like that. You can add as a URL. It looks almost like the DOI, right? But it's just the home page of the journal. We want to stay away from the Pepperdine library databases, those long 4-line URLs that say EBSCOhost, or they have a long string. Now, why wouldn't that be helpful? Why wouldn't I want to include the long URL that leads to like our Pepperdine library databases? Any ideas why that wouldn't be helpful?
Because some computers may not be able to recognize that.
Yes, essentially, yes. Like, we want to try to make this accessible to the general public, right? So if it's a non-Pepperdine student or someone that's not affiliated, that doesn't have access, then it would lead to a broken link, right? It would lead to like a login page, right? So it's not taking the reader directly to that source, right? A lot of those databases, you have to have some type of subscription, right? And, within the Pepperdine library database, it's kind of like database on top of database on top, right? So it's not really going to lead us directly to where maybe that journal article is, right? So great comment there. Yeah. So we don't want to, if you see your URL is about 4 lines, then I would avoid it. If worst case scenario, just leave it after the page range if you can't find a journal homepage there. All right. And here's an example of a narrative citation where we would integrate the author's name into the body of the sentence. So you'll notice only the author's last name there, and then the years in parentheses, and then some kind of key verb, something that is integrating the source into the literature. So another way that you can integrate the source as a text citation. All right. So how are we doing on time? Do we want to do another example? What do you think, Gina? Think we have time? Sure. Okay, so let's do another practice here, and we'll just do the second one. Let me pull up this one. So here is a journal article with a DOI. And if you have access to this document, free to click underneath, and maybe we can ask another volunteer if you can raise your hand, or if you would like to help to create that reference. And I'll try to put this side by side as best as possible. I know it's a little bit difficult with the size.
And I did put the link in the chat again, so it's there. Oh, wait, sorry about that. There we go. There's the link to the document. And anyone who would like to volunteer.
Anyone?
How about if I type and if you would all like to, okay, great,
I
Sheila,
think Sheila.
great.
All right, are you
thank
able to access the document? Awesome.
Excellent capitalization.
All right, so we got the volume number there.
I think I'm doing something wrong here. I think this was not supposed to be eat a lot.
Yes,
Yeah.
you're correct. Good
Yeah.
catch, Sheila. Great
Good.
catch. And am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yeah, you're
Okay.
good.
Good. Yes.
Excellent
Uh,
catch.
This one is not.
Correct. Good. Good eye.
Yep, 34. And we have the 1 is the
One.
issue.
Hold on now, I don't remember. Let me see.
If you look to the right here, you could see what's next here, right?
Do I have to do PP or not? I don't have
No.
to, right?
Not for the
No,
journal
mm-mm.
article reference, no.
What is? And then I have to
And
do
then
this
that
one.
link, yeah, probably easy. Yeah, I would just copy and paste those links. It might bring it down to another line, but that's fine.
Excellent.
And everything, yep, the only thing I see there is instead of the period after the practice, instead of the period, we would put a
Oh.
comma
Oh,
Yeah.
there's a comment.
instead of the
Okay.
period. Yep, but excellent. Thank you.
Excellent. Great job. Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you.
So we have the authors there. It does say Christina D. Hogan. Maybe there was a C and a D, but for the most part, the first initial. The main thing is consistency. If there's multiple articles by that same author, then we'd want to make sure we're using like that 1 or 2, but initials. But yep, the authors are there, the year, then we have the title in sentence case there, and then we have the journal information. And then we just want to throw a comma there. All right, great, thank
Great
you.
job. Thank you. And to get back to the shared screen, you can all click on your Zoom, although actually,
I was
maybe-
gonna ask, do I have to change the letter for Times New Roman for the link or not?
That's a good question. Yeah, we would want to be make sure that it's all the same font. Yeah, that's a good catch. Yeah, you did copy it and it was probably like Arial. So we would want to make sure the reference text is all the same as, you know, the rest of the paper. Yeah.
All
So
right,
if you're
thank
using
you.
Times New Roman, then you do want to make that all the same. Yeah, so that's a good catch. If you're copying and pasting, sometimes it will give you like the default setting there in your Word. Yes, Karen, did you have another question?
I did, and I know Regina has told me this 100 times, but what is the cutoff point for the number of authors that you have to keep blah, blah, blah until you hit the ampersand. How many is too many?
Yeah, I think it's on a future source, a future slide. I think it's 20. You have to write the first 19, and then you can do the little ellipses and then do the final one. So at least up to 21, I think, or 20 authors.
I think up to
Yeah.
20.
20, there you go.
And then
Thank you,
after
Gina.
that, yeah.
Yeah, after that you can list all of them and then the ellipses and then the final one. Yeah, that, that might happen, where you might have a large author pool there. But that would be the formatting there for that. Good question there. So sometimes we might not always have all of that information. So for example, if we didn't have an author, we're just going to move the title over to the who, to the author position. So there can be rare cases where you have some documents that don't have an author. And so in that case, you can use the title as the author. In other cases, you can use like the institution as the author or the group author. If it's not associated with the person, sometimes there's an organization there, or like the website name, that organization we can use. And you can, but at the same time, the APA manual also provides an example of something without a particular author. So you'll notice just the title of the newspaper article. Portia asked about et al. Yes, no, not in the references. So in the reference entry, we need to make sure that we include all of the authors' names up to those 20 of them. In the text and the citation, that's different. We'll look at some of those examples. But in the references, yes, we do need to include all of those authors. So we have the title of this newspaper article is in sentence case. Notice just the H and the D there are the only items capitalized. Then we have the date. It's 2007, September 14th. It's a specific day. And that can be found in the New York Times there. And then we have the URL. If we were going to cite it without the author, we would you don't have to include the whole title of the article in the citation. You can just put maybe the first couple of words in quotes there. And that could be the place of the text citation for this source. Okay, Sheila, did you have a question?
Yeah, if I don't have an author and then the book start with a year, would I put then the year as in the beginning in the alphabetization?
Hmm,
No,
good
that would be,
question.
that's a good question. Yeah, that would be sorted by the title of the book. So you'll alphabetize it by the title, because the title will be the first element and then the year would go after. So whatever, like in the D in Darfur, I would sort this, I would organize it by D in the reference list.
Okay.
Okay, so it's alphabetized by the title of the source. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for
Is
your
that what you
question.
were asking, Sheila, or were you asking if the title of the book begins with a year?
For example, it would be insert. I don't have like that last name Bujurk, and then the name of the book is 2000 Retrieval. So then 2000 Retrieval will be
Oh, like if the complete title starts with the number?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that would be in the beginning then, right? I believe numbers go before letters,
And
right?
Yeah, that's yes.
I
Yeah.
believe that's correct. I believe that's what it is. Yeah, you would put any numbers, any titles with the number would go for if it doesn't have an author, right? We would always sort it by the author, but if you're sorting by the title, then if it's a number, then that would go first.
And then if I don't have an author, I write ND or not? No.
If
The
there's
ND
no
is for
year.
no date.
Yeah,
If there's no
for
date.
no date. Yeah, that's true.
And we have some examples of that as
Oh,
well.
okay.
Yeah. Good questions though. Yeah, great questions. There's always some of those little outliers or there's some nuances there, and that's why having the APA manual is very important, right? Because we're not going to be able to cover every instance here, right? So there are variations depending on authors and names. If you have a large reference list, it can get very complicated. So having the APA manual, there is really helpful. So here's an example of a chapter in a book. So if you have a textbook or a large book that has many different authors that are for those individual chapters, then we're really highlighting just those chapters, not necessarily just referencing the book. So we would use the author of that chapter, you know, and have that as the first element. And then we have the when of the whole book, you know, the year of the whole book. Then we have the title of the chapter. So retrieval inhibition, that is the title of that chapter. Notice the sentence case without italics. And then we have the complete book title. But we also want to include editor information. So typically those books where you have different authors for different chapters, there's an editor, one or more. And so we do want to include that information there with the abbreviation editor to distinguish between the author. And then we have the title of the complete book there. Notice the italics and the sentence case for a book title. And the page range. So in this instance, we do put the double P there when it's a book chapter. So just another thing that you need to kind of remember. A lot of this is kind of memorization. You know, the more you do it, the practice, the more times, then you'll have, it'll become more familiar. All right. And then there is the publisher. So I'm going to keep going here. You'll see there's the citation there with the direct quote, as we are kind of getting short on time. So there are some more examples. So here's a dissertation reference. We won't get into too much of those details there. I'll kind of cycle through. You know, a lot of what you'll get is from the internet, but when we do have those sources, we still want to include all of those elements as much as possible, right? The title or description of the document, when the date, when the article or the post, you know, was posted, using those hyperlinks, and we want to try to get those document names, not just the menu or the home pages. And check your URLs. When you do add those URLs, we want to make sure they're working. All right, so a few examples of some reports. So I don't think we'll have time to do a practice here, but this is an example of where we might have a document where like the government entity or the organization is the author. So a lot of times there might not be a specific person, but in these cases, we'll put the organization as the author. But all of those pieces, if it's a report on its own, then we're going to italicize it. But if it's maybe part of, a section in a larger report, then we won't italicize that. All right, so that is the general. Yes, Portia, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question here because a lot of the resources that I'm getting for my dissertation are from a lot of government sites and reports like the CDC, World Health Organization. So my question is, when I'm doing my references and it's still like the CDC, but it may be a different report of the CDC, am I listing CDC, like the Centers of Disease Control for all of them, and then putting the different links to the different pages? Or how am I listing, like, is it all going to be Centers of Disease Control with the different links and the different titles of what the subject matter is? Or is there a different way to do that for the government websites?
Yeah, I mean, you're generally going to look at the, the organization that is prominent on the page. There might be some subdivisions and things, but yeah, you can essentially use the same author for all of those sources. And then you're going to differentiate them either by the year or the title. So there is some variations. If you have the same author and year, then there are some ways to distinguish them. But yeah, essentially you would just use the same author there and you would have it multiple times. But the way you organize those depends on, what information that you have, on them. So whether it's, year would be chronological, or we put a little letter next to the year if we have the same year. So there are some details there that we might not be able to get to now, but yeah, I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yes, that's helpful. I think that's what I was more so looking for, because it'll be the same author, same year, but it's different things. So
Yeah.
And just a quick note, I learned that sometimes on some of those websites, there are individual authors. So look really closely at the article you're looking at to see, are there authors listed? Because in that case, you would put those authors in that case.
Yes. I've looked super close to try to differentiate as much as possible, but some of them are just, just the government side. So I just wanted to.
Sure.
Yeah,
Good question though. Yeah, you would separate there's a way to put next to the year a little lowercase letter like A, B, and C. And if you would like to, some more guidance there, feel free to reach out. We can set up a consultation to look individually at your examples, to help you. Okay, so I'm going to go through these a little bit more quickly here. Like we mentioned, the institution would be the author. If there is no date, we still want to make sure that we provide a space for the element, right? So the N period, D period would go there in the date element. And even if there aren't any page numbers, there is still a way to directly quote, and to attribute to where we can find the quote on a web page. We can use this abbreviation para. If there isn't any physical pages there that you see. Okay, the retrieve from, we don't need that any longer. We could just get right to the URLs after that. And so I'll just briefly kind of cycle through. There are a lot of references, and you can find a lot on chapter 10 of the APA manual there. With all of those more examples. So we have a few more minutes. I want to pass it over to Kate, and she just talk a little bit about integrating the source citations into the body.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so you'll use parenthetical citations when summarizing information from any of your sources, when paraphrasing that information, meaning that you're restating the information in your own words, or when quoting. So when you're lifting text from your sources and putting it in quotation marks. And it's important to note that when you're summarizing or paraphrasing, you provide the author's last name with a comma and then the year of publication. But with direct quotes always require a page number or a paragraph number if there are no page numbers. Okay, we want to keep the citations brief. And especially if you're quoting from a book, you don't want to quote huge blocks of text. You want to keep your quotations shorter. Give only information needed to identify the source. Again, we have the author's last name with a comma and then the year of publication. And then only in cases when we're quoting directly do we give the page number. Okay, so we'll look at how to integrate quotes through both narrative and parenthetical citations. Let's look at this sentence. Trust 2019 argues that it would be nice if one day the number of apostrophes properly placed in its equaled exactly the number of apostrophes properly omitted from its. So in a narrative citation, the author's name is integrated into the sentence. So only the publication year needs to be in parentheses next to the name. And then the page number here in parentheses directly follows the quote. And then in the parenthetical citation, all the source material follows the quote. So we have the author, the publication year, and then the page number. So here, I think some of you guys were asking questions earlier in the presentation about some in-text citations. So when you have two authors, you always cite both using the ampersand. So we have Smith and Hong, comma, 2015. But once you hit three authors, three or more, we're only going to cite the first author followed by et al, period, comma, and then the year of publication. And I think maybe in previous editions, there was no period after the AL, but for the 7th edition.
No, there was.
Oh, there was? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So this is an example. We have the parenthetical citation and then the narrative citation where the author is integrated into the sentence. So we just have the year in parentheses. And then for a specific part of a source or a direct quote, we're going to put the author's last name, the year of publication, and the page number, or we put the paragraph number when pages are unnumbered. Okay, so to cite references from a class lecture, At times, you might summarize information or a quote from a lecture. So we have first the format for your reference page, and then we have the narrative citation and the parenthetical citation. And other examples, we have personal communications, which might reference an interview, an email, or other correspondence. So here we have the example, P.A. Smith, comma, so we have the person who is providing the information, and then personal communication, and then the date of the communication. And it's important to note that the participant responses in your research are not considered personal communications. And then secondary sources. So you might cite a study that you found in a particular source. So here's an example, Smith's study as cited in Jones. So Jones would be the author of the source. Oh, Crystal, do you have a question?
I do. I see that May is spelled out. A better example might be like April, right? Do you use APR or APRIL? Do you use the short version of the month or the long version of the month? It's hard to tell with May because it's only 3
Oh,
letters.
that's a good question. Let's see.
It
I
is,
believe
it is actually spelled out. I
Yeah.
believe, Carlos, yeah, right?
Yeah, I believe you would write it
Okay.
all out.
Mhm.
Yeah. But you know, personal communication, probably rare instance that we would, as students here, you know, that we would be using that. If you're writing dissertation work, you don't need to use that personal communication. You're just using parentheses and the pseudonym of the participant and things like that. But yeah, you would probably write out that whole month. Yeah, write it out.
Okay, thank you.
Right, sure. And I
Yeah.
think
And I do want to point out that for those of you who do have the actual manual, the tab that is reference examples provides so many detailed examples. You have a web page on a news website, web page on a website with a group author, website on a web page with an individual author. It's basically like every iteration of, you know, different sources that you might have. And it's a really incredible resource. So I would
Yes.
definitely recommend jumping to that tab when you have
chapter
questions.
10. Yeah, I believe it's
What's that?
chapter
Yeah,
10.
exactly.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All of those examples. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Kate. Yeah, we have some links here. The APA Style has their own website where you can have a lot of downloadable resources available for free. Also, our community page, we have some resources on APA. We have posted, you know, previously recorded webinars and like this PowerPoint. Also, the library has some tools to help to manage those sources, some citation management software. So if you're interested, there are some links there with some information on those guides. So yeah, I think we're a little bit over here. So I'll go ahead and I'll stop my share. But wanted to just thank you all for joining us today. It was a lot of information. So feel free to reach out if you have any particular questions about what was covered. Also, if you have specific APA questions, you know, and you'd like to discuss them further, just feel free to reach out to me or you know, one of the consultants there on the WC online schedule. But just we also have a lot of this information available for you because we really want to help you to be able to you know, do this work individually and independently so you can gain the skill. And it does take practice, right? It does take repetition and practice there. So thank you all. If Gina, do you want to add anything?
No, just I'm really glad that you all attended. Thank you all for being so engaged. And it's clear that you all already have some knowledge about APA format, so that's wonderful. But just a quick tip, if you're not sure, it's really easy to look things up. So we really encourage you to do that. And the APA website, style website is also great. And I included that link in there. And that will also be included in the PowerPoint when you receive that. So thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. You'll
Thank
have a great
you.
rest of your night.
All right. Have a great night.
Thanks.